Okay, let's talk about how to stay motivated in the off season. And the reason that I'm even talking about this in the first place, which is primarily the fact that I'm trying to stay motivated in the off season and it's really hard. Now, let me first start by saying that this message is oriented pretty much exclusively to non-professional athletes, and I'm defining that as people whose like a significant portion of their income, aka they're not paid necessarily to do whatever their athletic activity does. And let me also add that I'm a cyclist primarily. Like you know, that's what I do. But yeah, so where we're at, well, it's November. As of I'm recording this video, the last significant race I did was in early October, I think. And since then, there's been nothing. And there will be nothing until February at like the earliest. So I'm in a slump. You know what I mean? So I mean, this is like my off season. This is not like there's no quotation marks or whatever. This is my off season, and I have to stay motivated with like a goal that's pretty distant, right? I mean, it's one thing if you've got a race around, next month or something like that. That's a whole other thing. But then for, my primary goal not being until, I don't know, I think it's March or April. Like it's a long time away, all things considered. And so I not only have to like stay in shape, but I need to keep pushing and like grow and perform and all that. But it's hard. It's really hard because it gets darker earlier, it's colder. I mean, there's all sorts of like, excuses that are like, oh, I don't want to go outside today, or I don't want to bike today, or all that. I mean, I work full time, 40 to 50 hours a week. So I get home, it's already dark out, and now what? I have to get on the bike for an hour, 2 hours, and then cook dinner and get ready for the rest of the week. I mean, because that's what it is. And I don't think that's, an abnormal experience. I think that's pretty common for normal people who, work full time or do whatever. Obviously, it was a lot easier for me to bike and get in miles and hours and all that when I was in school because I had a lot more free time. And now I'm in a place to where now I've got a lot of goals and priorities and things to balance and bills to pay and all that sort of stuff. So it certainly makes it complicated. And so I'm trying, today I went out and I ran. I didn't even get on the bike. I ran because I wanted to do something different. And it just made me start thinking like, why am I doing this? What's my motivating factor? And how can I be motivated to keep pushing, especially when like I was supposed to bike today. Like that was on the agenda. That was planned ahead of time from my coach to me to do 2 to 3 hours, 3 hours ideally, and instead I ran for 50 minutes. So there's obviously a difference between that. So let's get down to business and start with, I guess, the first thing on my list, which is recognize your imperfection. Right? You're not perfect, so you're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna slip up. Maybe you had plans to do one thing and instead you do something else. Or you do nothing and decide to push it to another day or something like that. Like recognize that you are a flawed human being because everyone is, and that fundamentally what you should be striving for is to just be doing better each day, just a little bit better each day. Maybe you decide, like I decided Thursday, a couple of days ago, it's a Sunday for context. I decided Thursday I was supposed to ride for like an hour and a half. I decided not to. Mainly because I felt bad that day. Something on my body was telling me something was up, and I felt a little guilty about it. But at the end of the day, I made a compromise with myself that said, well, this is in the interest of my health, because if I'm feeling bad, I don't want to exaggerate that. And two, I'm going to make a stronger effort this weekend to try and not necessarily make that up, but do some good quality work. Because there's a balance. You've got overtraining as a concept and that sort of stuff, to where sometimes you just, for whatever reason, you don't want to go and do that thing that day. But as long as we can do better the next day, or, do better in some way, shape, or form. I think that's something to strive for. So it's a two-part, point, which is recognize imperfection and just try and do a little better each day. Number 2, and I think this is pretty important as well. I mean, they're all important. That's why I'm listing them. But train with people. Like, be among other people, because this is such a lonely, or at least can be such a lonely time of year. I mean, I live alone right now, which, there's pros and cons with that. In many ways, I'm fortunate. I'm very fortunate that I do. In other ways, obviously, like, I'd like to have company. I'd like my girlfriend to live with me. She doesn't at the time because she goes to school and in a different town and all that sort of stuff. So like that can't happen. So it's particularly, feels particularly more lonely. There's a better word. It feels lonelier to me because live alone. I'm in a new town, new to me. I don't have that many friends around. And so, there's a lot of things that can keep me training alone and feeling unmotivated because I am the sole decider and controller of my own fate. Like there's no other outside influences. Now I've tried to mitigate that individually by adding a coach into my life a few months ago. And so like that helps to at least have some sort of accountability, because if I don't do a workout, if I don't go riding or whatever, I have someone going, why didn't you do this? And I have to have that little mental push in my head. But still, fundamentally, it didn't make it easier. I mean, I could have ridden today. It was a nice day. It is a very pretty day. And I chose not to, because the thought of riding alone for 2 hours, it wouldn't have been 3. I would have said to myself it would be 3, but it wouldn't be, was just, too much. And could I have waited for a group ride? Yeah, I could have. There were a couple of reasons I didn't, but that was certainly a possibility. So, I mean, that's just, that's something to be aware of. But it's always easier, at least for me, to be among community. And I know for some people that can be difficult. I mean, I wouldn't say I necessarily make friends that easy. I mean, I don't seek friends. Just me as a person, I'm pretty comfortable alone. Doesn't mean it's like easy necessarily, obviously for certain things like working out. But, trying to seek group rides and opportunities and things like that. I mean, that's why I keep driving an hour, 20 minutes to like go for a group ride. I'm willing to do that just because I know that's going to be enough to make me be on the bike for more than an hour. So if that's what it takes, it's stuff like that I have to make the choice and be willing to do, because otherwise it gets hard. So just being among people definitely helps, because having that influence to go, well, if you were alone, maybe after an hour or an hour and a half of it being, 40 degrees or just on one straight road for a while, it just, it gets boring. But then having people there is a motivating force to go, okay, let's, we can do this. So why don't we go an extra 10 miles or something like that? You're more willing to do that. And for me, it's more competitive, depending on the group ride and all that sort of stuff. Now, again, I'm a cyclist at heart, and a lot of my sport, for all you cyclists out there, as you know, depending on where you live, at this time of year and as it gets further and progresses into the winter, you cannot bike. I mean, I can, fortunately. I have a lot of great opportunity because I live in the south. It gets cold, but it doesn't snow. And if it does, it's very, very little. So, that's not a huge thing. But for people who live further north or wherever that get a lot of snow or a lot of different reasons that they, physically cannot go out and bike safely, that pushes everything indoors. And I've got my training set up that I have in here for my indoor trainer, and I ride Zwift, which is an indoor cycling app that kind of gamifies stuff, and that helps a lot. But obviously that can be hard too, to motivate yourself to ride indoors. And so, definitely trying to make that more interesting for yourself among people, like doing the group rides on Zwift, doing racing, stuff like that. Or another thing that I've started doing recently is just streaming on Twitch. I mean, that's just something personally I already did. I stream a lot of games and stuff like that. But to be able to stream my riding and be able to interact with people while I'm biking has made it so much better. I mean, it still keeps the pain in the pain cave, because this is where you're stuck, but it does make it a lot more interesting, and it helps motivate me. I mean, there's certain things that can affect it, but but it does help. So number 2, be among people. And kind of in that note about things to make things more interesting brings me to my third point, which is make it interesting. Find things that motivate you and keep it different. I think this is a good opportunity, especially for single sport individuals, particularly cyclists. Really, this is all I'm talking about is cycling. Is like I've started running just because it's something different. And I mean, I have other biking activities I do too. Like I have a mountain bike. So I'll go out mountain biking sometimes, or I'll go out gravel biking, like just something to change up, going on like the same road and doing the same ride day after day after day after day, because that's what I started doing when I first moved here, and it was fine whenever like every other weekend I'd be doing a cool bike event somewhere else and then break it up. But being able to just go out and say, you know, I really don't want to go out on the bike today for X, Y, and Z. As much as I love biking, I really do, but that spark's not there for me right now, so I'm going to go out and I'm going to run for 20, 40, whatever minutes. And it may not necessarily be the fitness equivalent, but like you went out, you were active, and, you know, I think there's still benefits to it. Even if, you know, running 20 minutes, riding for 2 hours, like you're still working on your cardio, you're working different muscles, things like that. You're keeping it interesting and, and just helping yourself move along. Because I think like beyond just trying to do better every day, like being active in whatever way, shape, or form you can is like still a good thing. And also going to the gym, that's something I do a lot, especially in the off season. I mean, I go about 3 times a week currently. That'll kind of taper off as we move into December and some training stuff switches, and I'll have to be on the bike more than I currently am. But like this is a good opportunity to like switch it up and remind yourself too of, at least for me, this is kind of how it goes, to where after like enough stuff, like enough time like grinding out in the gym or running or whatever, that I start to recognize like, oh, this is why I like being on the bike. This is what the bike does for me, and this is kind of where my passion lies. And especially if you can come out on the other end of that like stronger, whether it be mentally or physically, like if you can come out like a little better at the end of the day. And I'm not saying like, oh, you went, you know, X amount faster in this certain distance, or put it down this amount, much more power. Like obviously that's a big thing, and that's an important thing for like performance. But I mean, just like on the mental side of things, like did I come out on the other end of the off season feeling like still in love with the sport? Because it's so easy to get burned out right now. And I think whatever you can do to keep that like spark alive, to bring into the next, you know, to the new season, whether it's just like, you know, keeping it kind of smoldering and whatever and just limping it along, as long as that spark doesn't like completely go out, I think you have succeeded as an individual athlete. So yeah, I mean, those were just some thoughts off the dome for what I think can help motivate you during the off season, particularly for cyclists, because that's my sport. And, you know, again, full disclosure, it's not easy for me, and I'm honestly making this as much for y'all as I am for myself, because I need some motivation right now, and need to feel like I can express these kind of feelings instead of just being like, oh, whatever, I'll get over it and move on, because that's not healthy. And the whole goal is to build a better, stronger mental image or mental capacity, I think, to understand, because so much of this is mental. I mean, I think in many ways the physical part is pretty easy, like just going out and doing something, like the actual doing is fine, but the motivating to just go out, like for me to get on this bike, it can take quite a bit. So just some thoughts to leave you with, and if there's anything you feel I didn't address, or maybe certain things that help you and motivate you during this off-season time, like please let me know, because I'd love to get some advice for myself to keep me pushing, and not trying to upset my coach for going, why aren't you doing this stuff? He's actually a really nice guy. He doesn't say stuff like that. He worked with me. But regardless, thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next one.